A single man stands on a dusty road with a sword in his hand and a heart full of fire. He is not looking for peace or for mercy, but for the blood of those who follow a new faith. This man is Saul of Tarsus, and he believes he is doing the work of God by destroying a small movement. In the year 34, the air in Jerusalem is thick with tension as the followers of Jesus are hunted through the streets. Saul is the leader of this hunt, and he watches as the first martyr named Stephen is crushed under a hail of heavy stones. He does not flinch when the rocks strike flesh because he is convinced that this new way is a dangerous lie. Imagine a world where the Roman Empire is at its peak, and the gods of stone and gold are the only ones allowed. Into this world comes a message that will change everything, and the man who hates it most will soon become its greatest champion. In this video, we are going to trace the life of a man who traveled over 10,000 miles to change the world. You will see how a scholar became a fugitive and how a persecutor became the most influential writer in human history. We will look into the secrets of the Roman roads and the ancient cities where the foundations of the modern world were laid. By the time this story ends, you will understand how one man's vision managed to outlast the Roman Empire itself. There is an open loop in history that many people miss because they do not see the massive shift in Paul's character. How does a man who wants to kill Christians end up dying as one of their most famous leaders in a Roman prison? The answer begins on the road to Damascus, where a blinding light changed the course of the entire human race. The sun was high in the sky, and the heat was rising from the ground as Saul led his men toward the city. He carried letters of authority to arrest anyone who claimed that Jesus was the promised King of the Jews. Suddenly, a light brighter than the midday sun crashed down from the sky and knocked Saul to the dusty earth. A voice called out from the radiance, asking Saul why he was persecuting the very truth he claimed to serve. When Saul opened his eyes, he saw nothing but darkness because the glory of the vision had taken his sight. His companions had to lead him by the hand into the city like a child instead of a powerful hunter. For 3 days, he sat in a room without food or water, wondering if his life was over before it had truly begun. A man named Ananias was sent to find him, and despite his fear, he laid hands on the man who had come to kill him. Something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and for the first time in his life, he could truly see the world. He was no longer Saul the Destroyer, but he began the transformation into Paul the Apostle, and the world would never be the same. Before we go any further into this epic journey, please subscribe to History Memory Chronicles to hear more stories of the past. Paul was born in Tarsus, which was a major center of learning and trade in what is now modern-day Turkey. He was a Roman citizen by birth, which gave him special rights and protections that most people could only dream of having. This citizenship was like a golden key that allowed him to travel freely and appeal to the highest courts in the land. He was also a brilliant student of the law, and he had studied under the famous teacher Gamaliel in Jerusalem. This unique blend of Jewish law and Roman culture made him the perfect bridge between two very different worlds. After his conversion, Paul did not immediately start preaching in the big cities, but he went into the desert of Arabia. He spent 3 years in quiet reflection and study, trying to understand how his old life fit into his new mission. When he finally returned to the other leaders of the church, they were terrified of him because they remembered his old reputation. It was a man named Barnabas who stood up for Paul and convinced the others that his change of heart was real. They began their first missionary journey together by sailing to the island of Cyprus and then into the rugged mountains of Galatia. They faced sorcerers and angry mobs, but they also saw people's lives changed by the message of grace and hope. Paul's strategy was to go to the biggest cities first, because he knew that ideas spread from the urban centers to the countryside. He would enter a synagogue and speak to his own people, and then he would go to the marketplace to speak to the Greeks. His letters to these early groups are now known as the Epistles, and they make up a huge part of the New Testament today. Paul was not just a speaker, but he was a writer who could explain deep mysteries in ways that common people understood. He told them that love was the greatest power in the universe and that everyone was equal regardless of their background. This was a radical idea in a world where your status was determined by your birth or your wealth or your power. The Roman Empire was built on the idea that might makes right, but Paul preached that weakness could lead to strength. As he traveled on his second journey, he felt a strong calling to cross the sea and enter the continent of Europe. He landed in Philippi, where he was beaten and thrown into a cold, dark prison for helping a young woman. Instead of complaining, he and his friend Silas sang songs in the middle of the night until an earthquake shook the foundations. The jailer was so moved by their character that he and his entire family decided to follow the same faith. This pattern followed Paul everywhere he went as he faced constant danger, and yet he never stopped moving forward. In Athens, he stood on the Mars Hill and spoke to the greatest philosophers of the age about the unknown God. He used their own poets and their own logic to show them that there was a creator who cared for every soul. Some of them laughed at him, but others were curious, and a small group of believers began to grow in the heart of Greece. Paul then moved to Corinth, which was a city known for its wealth and its wild lifestyle and its many pagan temples. He stayed there for 18 months, working as a tent maker to support himself while he taught the people every day. He wanted to show that his message was not for sale and that he was willing to work hard alongside the common laborers. His character was being refined by these experiences as his beard grew longer and his face became more weathered by the sun. He was no longer the angry young man from Tarsus, but he was becoming a father figure to thousands of people. Everywhere he went, he established small communities of believers who were called to live differently from the world around them. The challenges grew even greater when he began his third journey and spent 3 years in the massive city of Ephesus. Ephesus was home to the great theatre and the Temple of Artemis, which was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Paul's teaching became so popular that the local craftsmen who made silver idols started a massive riot against him. They were losing money because people were no longer buying their statues, and they filled the theatre with a deafening roar. Paul wanted to face the crowd himself, but his friends held him back because they knew he would be killed instantly. He realized that the message was bigger than any one man and that he had to be wise to keep the mission alive. The pressure was building as Paul felt a strong urge to return to Jerusalem, even though he knew trouble was waiting. His friends begged him not to go because they had heard prophecies that he would be bound and handed over to the Romans. Paul told them that he was ready not only to be bound, but even to die for the name of the Lord he served. When he arrived in Jerusalem, a riot broke out in the temple, and the Roman soldiers had to drag him away to save his life. He stood on the stairs of the fortress and spoke to the angry crowd in their own language until they screamed for his blood. The Roman commander was confused and ordered Paul to be whipped, but Paul revealed his secret weapon of Roman citizenship. The soldiers were terrified because it was illegal to whip a Roman citizen without a proper trial, and they backed away. Paul was moved to the city of Caesarea, where he was kept in a palace prison for 2 long years while governors haggled over his fate. He spoke to kings and rulers like Felix and Festus and King Agrippa, who were all amazed by his logic and his passion. Agrippa told Paul that he was almost persuaded to become a Christian himself because the arguments were so powerful. Finally, Paul used his legal right as a citizen to appeal his case directly to Caesar in the city of Rome. This began a long and dangerous voyage across the Mediterranean Sea during the stormy season of the late autumn. The ship was caught in a massive hurricane called a northeaster, and for 14 days they did not see the sun or the stars. The sailors gave up hope and began to throw the cargo and the ship's gear into the churning grey water. Paul stood up in the middle of the storm and told them that an angel had promised that no one would lose their life. He encouraged them to eat and to stay brave, even as the ship was smashed to pieces on the rocks of the island of Malta. They all scrambled to the shore on broken planks of wood, and every single person survived, just as Paul had said. While they were building a fire on the beach, a poisonous snake crawled out of the heat and bit Paul on the hand. The locals thought he was a murderer being punished by the gods, but Paul simply shook the snake into the fire. He suffered no harm at all, and the people realized that there was something truly special about this man of God. After 3 months on the island, they finally set sail for Rome, where Paul would face the final chapter of his life. He was allowed to live in his own rented house, but he was chained to a Roman guard 24 hours a day. Even in chains, he did not stop working because he welcomed everyone who came to visit him and wrote letters to his friends. These letters were carried by messengers across the empire, and they became the instructions for how the church should live. He wrote about joy and peace and how to treat others with kindness, even when life was incredibly difficult and unfair. His influence was spreading through the very palace of the emperor as the guards heard his message and told others. History tells us that Paul was eventually released for a short time before being arrested again during the reign of Nero. This time he was not in a rented house, but he was thrown into the Mamertine prison, which was a cold and wet dungeon. The light was dim and the air was thin as he sat on the stone floor, waiting for his final sentence to be carried out. He wrote a final letter to his young friend Timothy, asking him to bring his coat and his scrolls before the winter came. He said that he had fought the good fight and finished the race and kept the faith until the very end of his journey. In the year 67, Paul was led out of the city of Rome to a place called the Three Fountains for his execution. As a Roman citizen, he was spared the pain of the cross and was instead granted the quick death of the sword. He laid his head down on the block with a peace that surpassed all understanding because he knew his work was done. The sword fell, and the life of the greatest missionary the world has ever known came to a silent and powerful end. But the death of Paul was not the end of his story, because his words were already burning in the hearts of thousands. The small groups he started grew into a movement that eventually became the official religion of the Roman Empire. The roads he walked and the cities he visited are now the sites of great cathedrals, and millions of people follow his teachings. Paul took a local faith and turned it into a global message that reached every corner of the known world at that time. He showed that one person who is truly committed to a cause can change the direction of history for 2,000 years. His life is a reminder that no matter how far we are on the wrong path, we can always turn around and find a new way. He went from being a man of hate to a man of love, and from a man of war to a man of peace. The legacy of St. Paul is written in the lives of everyone who believes that there is hope even in the darkest prison. His story is a cinematic epic of courage and travel and the power of the written word to outlast the sword. As the map of the ancient world glows with the light of the faith he spread, we see the true impact of his mission. What we do today echoes in eternity, and history always remembers those who are willing to sacrifice everything for the truth. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of the Apostle Paul, click the video on your screen to learn more about the ancient world.